Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning.
First, I'm going to wait a second because unless I'm not seeing a form of members yet.
And I'm assuming there's no one in the room right now. Looks like there's a
You are.
couple people.
There are a couple of people here.
All right. Are there committee members in the room?
Yep, just myself and two other folks.
Good morning, everybody. For the
Jay, your audio broke up for me for a minute. I don't know if you had said anything.
only that we are waiting for a moment to get to quorum.
Okay.
I just showed up. Sorry, I'm late.
Okay. First, I am seeing 4 committee members. Is that correct?
That's what I'm seeing. Annette, is that a quorum? I think it is.
Yes, it is.
Okay, then I will call the September 13th meeting of the MVPE committee to order. Thank you, everybody, for joining this morning. Our first item of this is to review approve the agenda. Does anybody have any to the as shown?
Can we go back and do a roll call and
Okay,
welcome and introductions?
please go ahead.
Okay, Jay Arnold,
Here.
Shell Anderson,
Present.
Ben O'Mara,
Here.
Damon Doyle, Justin Bourgo,
Here.
Pete Reiki, and Katie Sheehan. So that is a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as shown on the screen?
So moved.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, we will proceed with the agenda. First item of business is to review and approve minutes from our July 23rd, June 14th meetings. The July 23rd meeting was a special meeting. Does anybody have any comment on minutes?
Jay, I think your audio's a little bit breaking up. There we go. That might help.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm gonna try with video off and seeing if that helps. I will also shift to a phone connection on my audio. Okay, is there any public comment on the minutes? Hearing none, could I get a motion to approve the 2 sets of minutes on our agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Next on our agenda is a number of opinion requests from Bellevue, DuPont, and King County. We'll start with the mechanical code. Krista, can we start to walk through these individual changes? Or individual interpretations? Thank you.
Krista, if you're talking, you're muted.
Sorry about that. First one, September 01 from the City of DuPont on the Washington State Residential Energy Code, section R403.5.6, asking if the insulation pad is required under gas water heaters. And the draft answer is yes. This section was previously titled electric water heater insulation and limited the application to only electric water heaters, but there was a code change proposal in 2021 to require insulation pads under all types of tank water heaters.
Okay, is there any comment from the committee on this interpretation? Is there any? Go ahead.
Shall
Sean.
I think it's, I mean, I think it's a correct opinion. How are we going to do this, Jay? Do you want to vote on each one or?
I was thinking that we would, because I think there's some that we will have some discussion on.
Sounds good.
Okay, is there any public comment on this?
You have not entered any. Please read.
Hearing none, could I get a motion to approve this opinion?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, this opinion is in effect. Next.
Okay, September 02, this is regarding changes in occupancy. This is from the City of Bellevue. And the first question is, if an existing group R1 hotel is adding kitchen facilities to their sleeping units to create condos, this involves a change of use from group R1 to R2. Does WSEC section 505.3 item 2 require this building to be brought up to full compliance with the Washington State Energy Code? Is it sufficient if they can prove that the new design does not use any more energy than the original building? The proposed answer is no, the building would not need to be brought into full code compliance. The intent is to make sure any dissimilar occupancies meet the requirements of the new occupancy group. The requirements for group R1 sleeping units and group R2 dwelling units are virtually identical. Any alteration of the space, however, would be required to meet the specifications of section C503 in addition to the requirements in the International Building Code, International Fire Code, and or International Existing Building Code. The second part is, if an existing group B building is converted to a group R1 with only sleeping units, but no dwelling units, what are the energy code requirements? This scenario does not appear to be addressed in C. The proposed answer is the conversion would fall under item 2 of section C 505.3 and would be required to be brought into full compliance with the code. And then Chell had a comment on this, asking if section C 501.1.1 would kick in unaltered portions of existing buildings used for residential purposes that received a certificate of occupancy at least 3 years prior to a permit application for residential uses shall not be required to comply with this code. And my response to his question was, this is a group B, so we're not talking about a residential building. We're talking about a office building being converted to residential, but that's a point for discussion. Did you want to discuss that or go on and do answer 3?
Why don't you go through answer 3 and then we can discuss
Okay.
all aspects of this. Thank you.
Question 3, if an existing group R1 hotel is converted to group R2 condos and now meets the definition of a residential building per the Washington State Energy Code, does that require full compliance with the residential provisions of the Energy Code now that it's changed from commercial to residential? Is it sufficient that they can prove that the new design does not use any more energy than the original building, or is that only if they use the total building performance method from R405? And I reference back to answer 1, which says that they would not need to bring the building into full compliance.
Okay, Chell, you had some comments.
Yes. So, and I was trying to look it up, which I thought that there was a law that passed that told us to put 501.1.1 in the code. Is that, am I remembering correctly?
You are. I remember a discussion that we had, and I will look up.
And I was, yeah, because I was trying to figure out, the law said a specific thing, and I thought the intent of the law was to allow conversions to group R, from something to group R without requiring certain other things to happen. So that's why I made this comment, but I wasn't able to find the actual law that said that.
It's House Bill 1042.
Okay.
Let's see here. And my recollection is the same as yours, that the whole purpose of this bill is conversion of commercial space to residential.
So under G in the 1042, it says well, it says through ordinance development regulations, zoning regulations, or other official controls as required under subsection 1 of this section, code cities, and I don't know what that means, code cities, may not, and then G, require unchanged portions of an existing building used for residential purposes to meet the energy code solely because of the addition of new dwelling units within the building. However, if any portion of an existing building is converted to new dwelling units, each of these new units must meet the requirements of the current energy code. I don't know. I was just trying to make sure that we're complying with the intent of the law, and I remember thinking it said a certain thing, but Yeah, I thought the intent was to allow conversions to R units without requiring the full energy code to be in it.
Yeah, and the section you were quoting in G, I think it's section 3 that applies to the
Okay.
State Building Code Council on page 5 or page 6 of the session law. And existing building just talks about the 3-year certificate of requirement or certificate of occupancy, does not specify the type of building.
Yeah, rereading
In
it.
any case,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, in any case, is it important that we reference both what Krista has in the opinion and this section? Or does the answer as written cover your concerns?
Yeah, I think it could have a few words to added to it, but rereading it, HB 1042 section 3 today, I'm recalling what we did, and it said that unchanged portions of existing buildings do not need to be brought up to current code. And that's what it says in chapter 5 anyway, was that if you don't touch a portion of a building, you generally, except for in a few cases, don't have to do anything with it. And so that's why we didn't include that language specifically in the code. And it does say that only the new dwelling units need to be brought up to code in the law. So I think we could add something like that into the answer.
Although there are no dwelling units being created here.
Oh, that's true. That's a good point. It's sleeping but not dwelling. The law does not. Yeah, the law says nothing about sleeping units. So that's a really good point. So I think ignore my comments in there. Because on all unaltered portions of existing buildings don't need to be brought up to code, and that's just normal for chapter 5.
Would, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ben.
Oh, yeah, I mean, feel free to go ahead. I was just going to mention, like, the law and the way the code's currently written in 501.1.1, it's indicating residential purposes, so it's not saying anything about dwelling units in there either. But I think it would still require compliance for those sleeping units that are being created to meet the code requirements, the current code requirements. So I think it would be helpful to reference that section in the answer to not imply that the entire building would need to be brought into compliance potentially if there's still unaltered portions that would not require changes.
And the point that I was going to make is also, if we were going to reference C 501.1.1, would we also need to do it in the answer to question 1 as well, since those are adding dwelling units. I see Eric Vandermeer. I'll open this up for public comments. Eric, go ahead.
Yes, for the first question, so section 505.3, change in occupancy, item 2 specifically says any space that is converted to a group R dwelling unit or portion thereof from another use or occupancy has to be brought into full compliance with the code. So not sure how we can answer that no when the code clearly says conversion to a group R2 dwelling unit requires full compliance of that space to the code. So, I mean, I think that one definitely needs some discussion in regards to that. And, you know, that's definitely a provision that's been in the code for many years. It is a specific Washington State provision that was introduced in the 1991 Washington State Energy Code. Originally, it was any space that's converted to group R in the 1991 code. I don't know when it was switched exactly to be limited to group R dwelling unit, but this is a measure that's been in the Washington code for a long time. That's not in the model code. So yeah, that's not consistent with the code language currently.
Which section, Eric?
Yeah, we could look at the section. It's 505.3 item 2. So it's currently says any space that is converted to a group R dwelling unit, you know, has to be brought into full compliance with the code. And I know, you know, a lot, even though these are minor revisions from going from a sleeping unit that had maybe a kitchenette, or that's now going to a dwelling unit that has full kitchen. Technically, the code requires full compliance as written. So. And then, yeah, I agree with Ben's comment earlier that we did clarify in section 505, 505.1.1.1 that the unaltered portions of existing buildings, you know, do not have to comply with that. So it's not the whole building that has to comply. It's just whatever's converted to a dwelling unit or whatnot. So it's the altered portion. So I know there's a lot of occupancies out there wanting to convert to group R2, you know, dwelling units. And so this is definitely a part of the code that needs additional work, you know, whether it's a group B conversion or it's a group R sleeping to dwelling unit conversion. Yeah, so there could definitely be some language that's added that, you know, alternate means and methods can be approved by the code official. But yeah, we kind of have to be careful how we answer that, and maybe very strategic about how that gets answered. Or we need to go into emergency rulemaking to modify the code because we need ways to create affordable housing in the state. So
to that point, Eric, I've always, whenever it says shall be brought into full compliance with this code, has always struck me as like an odd thing to say, because if in one code section you're saying it's full compliance with the code, and an adjacent code section says you don't have to alter anything that is not altered, isn't that full compliance with the code?
So that language was introduced in the 1991 Washington State Energy Code. It's Washington State specific language. And oftentimes, yeah, that's in my past experience, it's basically going through the whole energy code with the code official and deciding what you're going to do for this change in use. And it's typically a negotiation with the AHJ as to which portions of the code we're going to comply with and whatnot. It's been the change to group R dwelling has been a very difficult one to negotiate, yes, on projects.
But I guess the words full compliance with the code, does that mean you're not using chapter 5?
Yeah, you go back to chapter 4, in my opinion, and you go through chapter 4 and you decide, how you're complying with the code. Yes.
I feel like that's I don't know. I generally the more I read this, the more I don't like the idea of brought into full compliance with the code, because that's, if you comply with chapter 5, you are complying with the code. I think it means not a whole lot to be brought into full compliance with the code, because there's lots of ways you can get through the code, and chapter 5 is one of them. And I think it should say you need to comply with chapter 4 if that's what it really means.
I guess, Joe, you also have to remember that a lot of this language was introduced before chapter 5 existed, and it was broken into a separate compliance, so yeah, that was definitely in the past, that you're bringing that space, you're essentially going to have equity, that when somebody's moving into this new R2 dwelling unit, an apartment, or it's being sold as a condo, that it's equivalent to a new construction project, and what's being brought to force. So it was definitely, I think, an equity issue, that you're bringing that up to code, that you're saying that if you're renovating an old building that had single pane glass, and you're now selling this as a new apartment that wasn't an apartment before, that you're going to have a high quality building that you're moving into, that's going to have similar means. I don't know, that's how I've always interpreted the code. But yes, there's lots of different ways this has been interpreted over the years, and it's definitely something that needs to get clarified in the code.
Okay, let's thank you, Eric. Let's hear from Lisa Rose now.
Hi, this is Lisa Rose. I apologize for a little background noise. I'll just chime in and say that the way we've been educating the public about this particular detail that Eric's talking about, is consistent with the way he's describing it. That if you've got change in space conditioning is also similar, but in both of those cases, when it says it needs to be brought up to full compliance with the current code, it means just that, that it includes envelope, mechanical lighting, service water, additional efficiency credits, all of those requirements. So that's how we've interpreted this requirement for quite some time. Thank you.
Okay. I have got a question, Lisa, for given what you said about the interpretation, does the answer as drafted meet that interpretation as far as what you've been providing guidance and instruction on?
Well, it's saying that the building would not need to be brought into full compliance. Can you scroll up, Krista, so I could see the original question? And we're talking about question number 1 or 2.
I was looking at 1, but if you had comments
Okay.
on 2 as well, 2 and 3 as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it would only, what the code says is if it's being converted from a group R to something, to a commercial, or from commercial to group R. So kitchen facilities inside the sleeping units themselves isn't really converting it to commercial. Maybe Eric, you can chime in on this one, where, that's really the break point between, are you going from, group R to something other than group R, and vice versa. And so again, I would agree that if it is, you're just changing, if it's staying group R1, but you're adding something that's still being considered group R1 occupancy, then no, it wouldn't have to be brought into full compliance, because you're not triggering that. But if you're adding some kitchen facilities that then would be considered a non-group R1 occupancy, then the code, all the requirements would then kick in, and that would include mechanical too. So it's not just energy. At least that's the way we've understood it.
Okay, Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, yes, in responding to that question, I guess there is a nuance in that first sentence between saying no, the building would not need to be brought in full compliance, and no, the space would not need to be brought into full compliance. So the trigger on the energy code side is conversion to R2 dwelling units. And so that space from an energy code standpoint has, if you read the code literally, it has to be brought in full compliance. Not the entire building, but each of those units that are converted. And as Lisa mentioned, I do agree with the second half of this. You know, when you change from a sleeping unit to a dwelling unit, you know, in the mechanical code, that is changing how you ventilate it and the requirements. You are going to be adding energy usage. You're going to be adding to, you're probably going to be adding dishwashers and other things that use additional surface hot water. You're going to be adding you know, range exhaust above the kitchen. So those are things that are going to use additional energy as part of that change in use from a sleeping unit to a dwelling unit. So that there's a whole measure of code provisions that apply. That there's a lot of provisions in the energy code that are specific to sleeping units and that are specific to dwelling units, and different type of thermostatic controls and all sorts of things.
I apologize. The system is not letting me raise my hand. This is Nate Tilson from City of Bellevue. I submitted this. I just, sorry, I was a few minutes late to the conversation here, but I think ultimately what I was trying to get at with the question, it sounds like everybody's involved on that. We've been interpreting it the same way Lisa and Eric have in our jurisdiction. And I guess the fundamental question is, this section of the code seems to only address dwelling units, which are different than sleeping units. And my fundamental question is the intent to treat those separately? And if so, question two is like, well, if you're going from a business to a sleeping unit, it's actually not addressed in the code because the code doesn't talk about sleeping units. And so what I kind of want is the opinion, is the energy code talking about dwelling units and sleeping units together when it says dwelling units, or is it trying to differentiate between the two? And then the third question is, it's possible to go from a commercial hotel that's 3 stories and a woody walk up to a residential code building. And the question was, if I'm moving between the codes, is that different than moving within the commercial energy code? So fundamentally, it's the question between sleeping and dwelling units. So sorry to come off mute without my hand up. I apologize.
Thank you, Nate. That's helpful. Phil, go ahead.
Yeah, trying to get to a resolution on this. For answer 1, I think the first 3 sentences are fine, but what it says, any alteration of the space, however, it could say any conversion to dwelling units, however, would be required to meet the full code or something like that. Be brought into full compliance with the code per section C503 or I'd have to look it up, but C505.3 2. Just trying to get some language on the screen that reflects our conversation.
Right.
Well, I guess, sorry, for me, that confuses it more, because the first 2 sentences saying the change of use from R1 to R2 is not required to be in full compliance with the code. And I thought the intent of the previous was, if you're doing any alteration work in conjunction with that, you still have to follow the alteration section. And I think adding the word conversion in the second part adds more confusion back into the first sentences. So I'm wondering the intent there. Sorry.
Well, the code literally says any conversion to group R dwelling. So maybe we need to be clear and say conversion from R1 sleeping unit to R2 dwelling unit would be required to do something. Would that be clearer, Nate?
Yeah, if you're saying that a conversion from a sleeping unit to a dwelling unit only requires compliance with the alteration section, then I'd be completely fine with that if that's what you're intending. If you're intending that to be go back to chapter 4 and all that kind of stuff, then I think we need to make sure.
Well, I think the code is clear per what Eric and Lisa were saying, that 505.3 is pretty clear that it needs to be brought into full compliance with the code.
Okay.
A conversion from a sleeping to a dwelling unit.
Okay.
And I thought 1042 tried to change that at HB 1042, but the language in 1042 doesn't change that.
Then it seems to me like the sentence 1 and 2 is then contrary to the code.
Well, the first sentence is the building would not need to be brought into full compliance. It's just the parts converted to dwelling units would need to be brought up.
So if an entire building is converting from R1 to an R2, I guess that was the question. Was the intent of the question was I'm taking an entire hotel building and turning it now into a condo building. So I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm confused here.
Yeah, I think lobby spaces, corridors, the pool, those things are not dwelling units or sleeping units.
But the exterior envelope would be.
Presumably, yeah.
Okay.
Eric, go ahead.
Just as a point of reference, so I did a little code digging. It looks like up until the 2009 Washington State Energy Code, any space that was converted to any group R occupancy had to be brought into full compliance. And then in 2012, that was limited to just dwelling units. So the trigger changed in the 2012 code to be limited to conversion to group R dwelling units, just as some history.
Okay. Given our discussion, Chris has made some potential changes to answer number 1. Does that get to clarification of what we're talking about?
I think it's the provision of item 2 would need to be provision of maybe C503 C505.3 item 2.
Okay. Jonathan, go ahead.
The residential code provision says that any existing building due to a change of use must be brought into full compliance with the residential energy code. It's stated in chapter 5 of the residential energy code.
I guess that's a good point, is we could also add the residential energy code into the answer, because it's possible per a previous comment that a Woody walk-up hotel would be a Woody walk-up residential conversion.
I think that's what question 3 is addressing, my understanding.
Yeah, and I guess the question is specifically about group R1 hotel, which is not under the residential code, energy code.
Right.
Okay, then let's break these up for question 1 and answer 1 on the hotel conversion. Does the language shown on screen help clarify things, and are committee members comfortable with this? Nate, does this answer your submitted question?
Yes. Just so I clarify, it looks like you're saying that any portion of the building converted to an R2 still needs to meet the full energy requirements. And so if a portion of that dwelling unit is exterior wall, then that exterior wall would need to be upgraded. All the mechanical systems for that space would need to be upgraded. And that's what you're saying, which is pretty much in line with how we've been interpreting the code, which is fine. So.
Okay. Any further comment on answer and question 1? Okay, let's go down to 2 and 3, and because it seems like we brought up some additional issues here. For question 2, how do we want to handle the C501.1? I know Chell had looked at this ahead of time. We're bringing this legislation in kind of at the last minute. Are folks comfortable with putting together an answer here, or do you need more information?
So I guess my question is, this seems to be a mistaken oversight in the code because it only talks about group R2 dwelling units. So the response says it falls under item 2, but item 2 doesn't say anything about sleeping units. So if I convert anything to a sleeping unit, I would say the code says item 2 does not apply to sleeping units, only dwelling units. So converting to a hotel appears to not be covered, which maybe that's just a clarification, but that's what the code, I think, actually says.
All right, go ahead.
So yeah, as I mentioned, up until the 2009 code, it was clear that any space converged group R had to comply, but then that changed in the 2012 code where it was limited to only conversion to residential dwelling units, and then further clarified to just, yeah, group R dwelling units. So since 2012 forward, it's that provision has been limited just to dwelling units. So full code compliance is not currently required or triggered by the change of use section. There are other potential triggers like change in space conditioning or other things that could get you there, but not a change in use in the current code.
Shall go ahead.
So Eric, you think the answer is incorrect? Correct, right?
Correct. There's no trigger in the current code from group B to group R sleeping in. Correct. To be full code compliance. So the answer would be no. The space is not required to be in full compliance with code. Obviously, any new systems you're adding would have to, if you're taking a B occupancy that has no domestic hot water system or something like that, and you're adding a domestic hot water system to serve the sleeping units, that system, when you add it, has to comply with code, but you don't have to upgrade the envelope of the building and other things. It's not full compliance. It's just the systems that are added have to comply with the code.
The answer would be no. The conversion would not fall under item 2 of section C505.3. Other code requirements might, other code requirements apply.
And would not require full compliance or something.
One thing I'd like to. Go ahead, Eric and Shell, didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, any systems that are added would, yeah.
Okay. as we're discussing here, a change of the opinion compared to the first answer where we clarified it, I would like staff to weigh in on how they got to the original answer before we're looking at changing the answer. Krista, do you have any comment?
Well, I was kind of going back to the intent of the original code before we mashed it in with the IECC, and when it was just talking about conversion to group R occupancy and not specifying group R1 versus R2. So I was basically going off of more historical precedents than how the code reads now.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any comment on the draft that is on screen?
I think my one comment is that I get how the code reads, but I think my whole point is it seems very weird to regulate a hotel to a condo more restrictively than you regulate an office to a hotel. So I guess that's maybe future code thought, but the way it was previously written seemed to go back to the assumption before 2012, as Eric sent in, when it seemed to be more clear, and the addition of dwelling units, in my opinion, confuses this. This is clear, but again, it doesn't actually seem to make sense.
We'll be accepting proposals for the next commercial code cycle in a few months.
So if I could summarize your comments, Nate, you're saying this interpretation is clear from a policy point. We might have some work to do in the future.
I agree.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, got it. Okay, is there any further public comments or further comments on question 2 and answer 2? Okay, let's look at question 3. The staff draft opinion says it's covered in our answer previously. Is everybody comfortable with that?
And this was the one that Nate was saying that it doesn't address going from the commercial provisions of the code to the residential provisions of the code, and that isn't really addressed in my answer.
You've changed the answer to question 1 to be kind of the more restrictive literal code reading, which means if you reference question 1, I think it's the same thing. Like the residential code says full compliance is required. So if that's the stance that we're taking, then I think C answer 1 is fine for me, but I could see it needing to be clarified and put in some note that full compliance would be required per the residential code.
Thank you. Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to clarify in the answer to reference the relevant residential energy code section, as Jonathan mentioned, as well as potentially clarifying that the assumption for this condition is that the building itself would fall under a residential classification.
Eric, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to comment that condo is not a building code term at all. There are no triggers in the building code or energy code for condo, so it may be helpful to clarify the question that the conversion is to a group R2 dwelling unit, just to be consistent with code language, if that was the intent of the question.
I'm fine with that modification to my question.
And then, yeah, potentially we could have a conversion of a building that was built under the commercial energy code that has, I guess, exterior entrances and is there and is a low-rise residential building, and then now I guess could comply under the residential sections of the energy code. If it was 3 stories and less with exterior entrance building, it would be going from being a commercial hotel as originally constructed to going to be under the residential energy code, which would just be a really strange transition. So I don't know if we need to comment on that at all. So
this came up because we have this exact situation right now. It's under review for this 3-story hotel that's becoming a residential energy code building.
So that's the part of the question is, can they show compliance under R405, or do they have to show compliance under, which code are you starting to and then going to is an interesting question. So
I can't seem to raise my hand. I'm looking for the button. I want to claim old guy, but I'm not that old yet. I apologize. The section you're looking for in the residential energy code is section 505.1. Change of use of occupancy 505, and 505.1 describes what does and doesn't need to comply.
So do folks see the need to have more specific references in the answer versus commercial and residential provisions as appropriate?
I'm fine with that.
My question with this, if we're talking about if the question is a conversion of a hotel, R1 hotel to R2 condos, what's the reference to commercial provisions? Is there commercial provisions that would apply in this case?
It would depend on the structure of the building. If you have a central corridor, they would need to comply with the commercial code. If they were all exterior entrances to the dwelling units, then it could provide or could comply with the residential code.
I understand. Eric, go ahead.
I don't have anything further to add besides what Krista said. So thank you.
Okay. So it seems like we're coming to a conclusion on these answers. My question is the committee comfortable, given the level of detail that we have gone and the level of change, on approving this as is, or is this something that we want to surface to the full Building Code Council next week? Do we have a little, any thoughts on that from committee members?
Justin here. I think with all the multi-use stuff that's coming out of the woodwork right now, it might be good to throw this in front of the whole committee, just in case somebody else has another thought.
Charles, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we could bring this particular opinion to the full council. I would add the word not under answer 2. The conversion would not fall under item 2 of section 505.3. Just when we bring a draft for the full council.
Okay. Then could I get a motion that we refer this opinion as revised to the full council for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's moved by Justin, seconded by Cho. Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes. And we'll add this to the agenda for our meeting next week. Thank you for the discussion, and Nate and others, thank you for jumping in, given, yeah, I'm not seeing raise hand in my Zoom either, so I appreciate the discussion. Next opinion.
Okay, moving on to 03, on the International Mechanical Code. There's background for both of the two individual questions here. In the 2015 IBC and 2015 IMC, it was clarified that static fire dampers and static ceiling radiation dampers can only be installed in static systems. Further clarifications were added in the 2021 IBC and IMC that static fire dampers and static ceiling radiation dampers shall only be installed in HVAC systems that are automatically shut down in the event of a fire. Further language was added that static ceiling radiation dampers shall be installed only in systems that are not designed to operate during a fire, with exceptions for maintaining system operations. Our energy recovery ventilators that serve only a single residential dwelling unit, less than 100 CFM of outdoor and exhaust airflow with no recirculating return air, with ductwork that is installed in a rating floor ceiling assembly or roof ceiling assembly with duct openings that are protected by static ceiling radiation dampers required to be automatically shut down in the event of a fire. And the draft answer is no, with no supporting information.
Well, I can tell you, this is kind of my specialty. I'm heavily involved in the fire smoke damper stuff. And the reason why you cannot put a static damper in is because the ones that are in the systems that are designed to continue to run are tested under specific conditions, and they are tested much more rigorously than the static ones. So they're called a dynamic damper, the ones that operate under specific conditions during an emergency. And basically, if you don't shut that down, you're going to possibly compromise the fire damper, because if the fire damper activates and that unit has not shut down, then you're still blowing air through it. So I don't agree with the answer personally.
Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think, like Justin's saying, I don't think that it would be appropriate to provide a no answer on this from the council standpoint or the committee standpoint, is it produces a lot of risk for the system. And if there's an AHJ that is open to entertaining a specific approach or code alternate means of protection, then maybe leave it up to them to make that determination. But I think at the state level, maybe it's more appropriate to just confirm that shutdown would still be required, and the means of doing that would need to be determined by the designer.
Yeah, Ben, and I can find that language. It's either in 90 or 101 of the International Fire Code. So I will see if I can come up with that and get that to Krista.
Okay, and then for this would be something that we would get the details in time for the meeting, if possible, for the meeting next week. Is that, Justin, something that you can assist with?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually going to be doing fire damper training with fire marshals on Tuesday and Wednesday, and I will probably be speaking about the exact code. So
Okay.
I won't have any problem finding it. I'll email the code over to Krista probably Monday or Tuesday.
Okay. And any comment on question 2 and answer 2? Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess if the International Fire Code does specifically address the shutdown requirements, then yeah, we might need to modify question 2 or modify the answer to it. I guess we haven't, yeah, I haven't found a reference yet in the fire code that specifically addresses these types of systems. And what we have found is that, you know, for small ERVs where we have 6-inch ducts serving a single residential unit, we've heard that, you know, there aren't listed smoke detectors that are available. You know, you can't use the room smoke detector because it's not listed to shut down a piece of HVAC equipment. We've had jurisdictions that are hesitant to allow the central fire alarm system to shut down this because, you know, if you had a multifamily building, you may have, you know, 400 of these different you know, ERVs, one in each dwelling unit. That's a lot for a fire alarm system, have to go through and shut down each one of these. So we're definitely looking for if there is any fire code guidance on how to shut down these systems appropriately. So definitely open to hearing more about that. So yeah, I would recommend if someone knows that section, we should wait to formally issue that until we can do more research on that.
Okay. So what I'm hearing for both of these is we've got some research and we come back with some language for the discussion next week, if we can, and bump this one up to the full code council.
I'll dig into that.
Thank you. So could I get a motion to defer this to the full code council and to continue? Actually, can I get a motion to direct staff to continue to revise and bring this before the full code council?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to bring this back to the full council and have staff continue to gather some information. Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next.
Okay. The next concerns the mechanical code and how you apply typically come out after the code is published. And the question is it acceptable to use the latest version of ASHRAE 15 and ASHRAE 34 with approved addenda? The proposed answer is yes. Both ASHRAE 15 and ASHRAE 34 are continuous maintenance standards that include the latest development of safety standards for refrigeration systems and designation and safety classifications of refrigerants. The latest versions of these standards are needed to properly design, manufacture, and install refrigeration systems that are being designed to comply with the latest ASHRAE standards. Proposed addenda that are in public review are not recommended to be used until issued by ASHRAE.
Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, and maybe before we get into discussion for this particular item, I know that Eric had developed a lot of these questions that he worked with Laura at City of Bellevue to submit. And I think I don't know how much the committee members or other people on the call would like maybe a more broad overview of kind of the situation that in the design and construction community right now we're facing kind of an increasing amount of uncertainty and kind of confusion on what the requirements are for some of these refrigerants and equipment using different types of refrigerants and new types of refrigerants that we haven't typically used in buildings previously. So that's where I think the next couple of questions and interpretation requests are based around. And they've been separated out, but I don't know if there's maybe a general desire for kind of a broader overview at this point. But just kind of offer that out there. I know Eric has some talking points that you can go over to help explain some of these.
Thank you, Ben. Eric, do you want to provide any further background as we look at several of these on this topic?
Yeah, sure. I can provide some context. So there's been a massive amount of change to, we're in a refrigerant phase down. That's happening now both for Washington State and for the U.S. So there's been lots of developments in these standards of how we treat the refrigerants, whether for different types of mechanical systems. Really, we're having a lot of problems with existing buildings that are permitted that now can no longer get equipment, based on what they were designed with. So they might be designed under the 2018 code, for example, but are needing to use the latest ASHRAE 15 requirements to apply the equipment that can actually purchase at this time. So there's a lot of mixing and matching of code provisions and research. And so you'll see in some of these, we really need the latest ASHRAE information. As shown here, there's just been, dozens and dozens of changes to these standards. And we have to use the latest and greatest information that has been vetted, but again, recommending not using proposed addenda that haven't gone through the ASHRAE public review process. So this allows us to use the equipment that's actually being manufactured, and allows us the flexibility to the code officials to approve designs that are based on the latest standards that are out there. And it was a pretty big change in the code, that says we have to comply both with ASHRAE 15 and with IMC Chapter 11. So there is a due diligence that has to be done to not just comply with the mechanical code, but to also comply with these standards, so that are continuously evolving as we need them to. So, and then I can get into some of the details later on. We do have some diagrams that we developed as we get into some of the other interpretations, if folks like to look at pictures. So we shared those with the city of Bellevue, but so as we get into some of these specific questions and interpretations, we do have some diagrams that we can show the committee if needed. Thanks.
Great, thank you for the background. Okay, for this particular question, answers that would take the updated current adopted standards, and if there's a conflict, local code takes precedence. Is there any comment on this particular opinion? Could I get a motion to approve this opinion as shown?
So moved.
Second.
Been properly moved and seconded. All in favor of approving this opinion?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, this opinion is approved. Let's move on to the next one as we get into the fun details.
Okay, September 04B. This is application of standards for residential buildings. If equipment and appliances are listed and labeled in accordance with a later version of a standard that is acceptable. Oops. This is missing part of the question. Is that acceptable? No, it is there. Okay. For example, if they are listed and labeled under UL 60335-240-2022 edition 4 in lieu of 60335-240-2017 edition 3, and the proposed answer is yes.
Any comments on this? Could I get a motion to approve this opinion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, September 05. Also on the mechanical code, refrigerant piping shaft ventilation. The 2021 IMC introduced new requirements for refrigerant piping to be routed in rated and ventilated shafts. For mechanically ventilated refrigerant piping shafts, the IMC is silent on acceptable discharge locations. ASHRAE 15 includes provisions for mechanical ventilation fan discharge outlet location exterior to buildings. For naturally ventilated refrigerant piping shafts, the IMC and ASHRAE 15 with addenda are silent on acceptable discharge locations. Question 1, is it acceptable to use ASHRAE 15 2022 sections 9.12.22 and 9.7.82 as criteria for acceptable location for refrigerant piping shaft mechanical ventilation discharge location? Answer, yes. ASHRAE 15 clearly indicate the requirements for mechanical ventilation discharge location for refrigerant piping shafts. This is similar to the requirements in IMC section 1105.7, as IMC section 1101.1 requires compliance with both sections. The more stringent of the two shall apply.
Hey, Ben, go ahead.
And I guess I agree with the proposed answer here. And just to point out that currently with the 2021 IMC and Washington State Mechanical Code, ASHRAE 15 2019 is being referenced. So a lot of these requirements are clarified in the 2022 edition of the ASHRAE standard, which are being referenced here, and we previously addressed in one of the previous interpretation requests. So just want to make sure that the addition of ASHRAE is really important here, where a lot of this has been clarified for design and installation requirements.
Okay, let's keep going.
Question 2, does the separation from a window in IMC section 1105.7 and ASHRAE 12 2022 section 9782 apply to a fixed window? Proposed answer, yes. These sections require separation from the refrigerant discharge outlet to a fixed window.
Ben, go ahead.
And I think the question might be need to change to, I don't think it's supposed to be ASHRAE 12. I think it's supposed to be 15.
Correct. That's what I was going to say.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments on that with that revision? Okay, question 3.
Does the 15 feet above the adjoining grade level apply to refrigerant discharge outlets above an unoccupied roof? The proposed answer, no. 15 feet above an unoccupied roof is not required. ASHRAE 15 2022 section 9782 item D requires the termination point of a vent discharge line shall be made in a manner that prevents discharged refrigerant from spraying directly onto personnel that might be in the. See ASHRAE interpretation 1C 15-2001-2 for further information. And I can bring that up if you'd like to see the interpretation.
Let's see if there's any comments on this. Seeing none, I think we can just go ahead.
Okay. Question 4, is the criteria in IMC section 1105.7 and ASHRAE 15/2022 section 9782 the acceptable location for refrigerant piping shaft natural ventilation outlet location? And the proposed answer, yes, these sections provide the best guidance for natural ventilation outlet locations to the outdoor.
Any comments on this answer? Okay, let's keep moving.
Question 5, ASHRAE 15/2022, section 9782, item A, requires a makeup air opening at the top of the shaft for natural ventilation systems. This is not required by the IMC. Is this natural ventilation intake opening required? The answer, yes. A makeup air opening is required at the top of naturally ventilated shafts in accordance with ASHRAE 15/2022.
Any comments on this? Okay, looking at this entire opinion with that one housekeeping change, is there any comments on approving this opinion as revised? Could I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The motion is approved. Next opinion.
Okay, moving on to September 06. Also on the mechanical code, this time we're looking at the shaft construction. The 2021 IMC and ASHRAE 15 do not specify acceptable means of construction for the interior surface of a rated shaft for refrigerant piping that is conveying outdoor air. Is it acceptable to construct the rated vented shaft interior that is conveying the outdoor air with non-metallic duct construction such as fire-rated reinforced fiberglass wall panel, shaft liner, or similar materials? Proposed answer is yes. There's no specific requirement in the 2021 IMC Chapter 11 IBC Section 713 or ASHRAE 15 that requires a metallic surface to convey the outdoor air in a refrigerant piping rated shaft that requires venting.
Any comments on this? I get a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
So properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor of approving this opinion? Aye.
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 The motion is approved. Next.
Okay, moving on to September 07 on the mechanical code. The 2021 IMC section 1109.2.5 exception 2 is limited to refrigeration systems using group A1 refrigerants. ASHRAE 15/2022 section 9.12.1.5.1 item B does not include specific limitations by refrigerant classification safety group. Is it acceptable to follow the shaft alternative requirements of ASHRAE 15 in lieu of IMC section 1109.2.5 exception 2 for other than group A refrigerants? The proposed answer is yes, it is acceptable to install refrigeration systems without rated vented shafts with other than group A1 refrigerants where the refrigerant concentration does not exceed the amounts shown in ASHRAE Standard 34, Table 4-1 and 4-2. Please note the following. Refrigerant piping to be protected in accordance with IMC section 1109.3.1 annular space of each refrigerant pipe to be sealed at each floor or ceiling assembly in accordance with IMC section 1109.5. Refrigerant piping to be routed vertically where the adjacent space meets the requirements for refrigerant quantity to not exceed the limits of ASHRAE 15, 2022 and ASHRAE 34, 2022. See ASHRAE 15, 2022 with approved addenda and ASHRAE 34, 2022 with approved addenda for requirements for latest refrigerant change limit calculations for EDVC and LFL, as well as the latest values for RLC and LFL by refrigerant. Specifically refer to ASHRAE 15, 2022 for addenda I for, or I guess that's addenda L for A2L refrigerants in certain system types only require compliance with ASHRAE 15, 2022, section 7.6 and not section 7.3.1.
Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, so just some background here. There is some differences between how the IMC was published and how ASHRAE 15 has evolved that are pretty substantial. For these small systems like mini split, heat pumps, where we have very small refrigerant charges, there has been clarifications, and that these clarifications did not get into the 2024 IMC, which has been published. There are 2027 IMC code proposals, as referenced at the bottom here, that are going to help align the code. So those code proposals are just code change proposals. They have not yet been passed, but we're really leaning on the ASHRAE 15 language here that allows a little bit more flexibility to cost effectively install these heat pump systems in our buildings. There is one editorial change, Krista, needs to happen in that last bullet point. It should say refrigerant charge limits, not change limits. So I wanted to get that word corrected there. So yeah, folks have questions of this. Again, I do have diagrams of what this looks like. So this essentially avoids the rated vented shaft and allows you to run piping vertically in the building where it's fire cocked at each floor, and you don't have to have that rated vented shaft if the refrigerant charge is very small and within the limitations. So.
Okay, are there any questions or comments? Could I get a motion to approve this opinion and answer?
So moved.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor of approving this opinion? Aye.
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 Okay, this opinion is approved as with that housekeeping change. September 8th.
Okay, moving on to September 8th. Also in the mechanical code, section 1109.2.5, exception 3 for exterior refrigerant piping enclosure venting. The 2021 IMC does not require a rated vent shaft for refrigerant piping located on the exterior of the building where vented to the outdoors. Are there specific requirements in the IMC or ASHRAE 15 on minimum free area and acceptable location on the building exterior, distance from windows, operable openings, ventilation openings, exits, etc., for the vented openings in the exterior refrigerant piping enclosures? No, there is no specific guidance in the 2021 IMC or ASHRAE 15, 2022 on vent opening minimum free area, distribution, or locations for exterior refrigerant piping enclosures.
Okay, any questions or comments on this opinion? Okay, can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion that the committee recommends publishing the opinion as written here.
Okay, we have is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so the motion is to approve and publish the opinion as written. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, the motion is approved. September
Okay,
9th.
for September 09, still in the mechanical code, chapter 11. Application of ASHRAE 15.2 in residential refrigeration systems. The 2021 IMC chapter 11 does not include option for compliance with ASHRAE 15.2 2022 for refrigeration systems in residential applications. The 2027 IMC code change proposal M62-24 includes amendments to IMC chapter 11 to allow applicable systems and specific residential occupancies to comply with ASHRAE 15.2 in lieu of ASHRAE 15. Question 1, is it acceptable to show compliance with ASHRAE 15.2 for refrigeration systems and residential occupancies within the scope of ASHRAE 15.2? Proposed answer, yes, it is acceptable to show compliance with ASHRAE 15.2 2022 and approved addenda. Note the entire system must be designed to either ASHRAE 15 or ASHRAE 15.2 requirements. Local jurisdictions have the ability to approve code alternatives in accordance with IMC section 105.2 to document the code compliance pathway.
Okay, any questions or comments on this? Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, just reiterating the background information here. This is a standard that that is new and didn't exist when we passed the 2021 code. It is, you know, the latest standard of how to deal with these refrigerants in residential occupancies, including multifamily residential dwelling units. And again, it provides more flexibility. There are 2027 IMC code change proposals also on this one that we could reference, I guess. So there is proposed language to put this into the 2027 IMC, but it did not get into the 2024 IMC. Thanks.
Okay, Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess maybe a question for Krista, just in general, of how, like, is it appropriate to reference a standard that we don't currently have referenced in the codes with 15.2? Or is the answer that's being proposed here really kind of orienting folks towards a code alternative approach with their AHJ in this case?
Yeah, I think it would have to be through a code alternative.
Okay.
If it's not currently referenced.
Thanks. And then I guess, do we think the answer is written is clear on that? I think we have, like, the second sentence or the third sentence has that in there. But I don't know if we need to qualify the response anymore.
I might want to move that last sentence up to be the third sentence rather than the last sentence. Or state that it's acceptable to show compliance with ASHRAE 15.2 and approve on the approval of the AHJ.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's add that language since it's not a reference standard. Okay. And question 2.
Okay, ASHRAE 15-2, 2022, section 8.5.2.2 does not require shaft ventilation for refrigerant piping without piping joints within the rated shaft where the listed direct A2L refrigeration system serves only a single dwelling unit or sleeping unit. Is it acceptable to route refrigerant piping for more than one refrigerant system within the same rated shaft? Proposed answer, yes, it is acceptable in accordance with that 15.2 2022 to route refrigerant piping without piping joints in the shaft for more than one A2L refrigeration system within the same rated shaft without venting, where each refrigeration system only serves a single dwelling unit or sleeping unit.
Any questions or comments on this question and answer?
I was going to suggest what I think Krista's writing in right now. So thank you.
Okay. Seeing no discussion, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve this opinion with the revisions on screen.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, the opinion is approved as revised. Okay, let's go to September 10.
Okay, still in the mechanical code. We're now looking at ASHRAE 15, 2022, section 7.5.1.2, refrigeration systems in public corridors and lobbies. IMC Chapter 11 does not include restrictions for refrigerants in a public corridor or lobby. ASHRAE 15, 2019, section 7.5.1.2 only allows unit systems with acceptable quantities of group A1 or B1 refrigerants to be installed in a public corridor or lobby. ASHRAE 15, 2022, section 7.5.1.2 provides basis for installing class 2L, 2 or 3 refrigerating systems to serve a public corridor or lobby. The maximum refrigerant charge for R32 and R454B, 2 common A2L refrigerant manufacturers are using for unit systems, will only allow a maximum refrigerant charge of 2.02 pounds and 1.96 pounds in accordance with ASHRAE 15, 2022, equation 7-7A. LFL values above are based on ASHRAE 34, 2022, Addendum A. Question 1, the IMC does not contain similar requirements for refrigeration systems located in a public corridor or public lobby. IMC only includes provisions for where refrigerant piping is prohibited to be installed in 1109.2.3. Do refrigeration systems with A2L refrigerants need to comply with ASHRAE 15, 2022, section 7.5.1.2, item C? The proposed answer is yes.
Okay, any comments on this? Let's keep going.
Question 2, does ASHRAE 15, 2022, section 7.5.1.2 only apply to refrigeration systems where the equipment is located within the lobby or corridor? Proposed answer, yes. This section applies to unit systems where the equipment is located in the public corridor or lobby. This would not apply to unit systems installed outside of the corridor or lobby, such as a rooftop package unit serving the corridor.
Any questions or comments on this?
Question 3. Is it correct that there is no correction for the effective dispersal volume for refrigeration systems with A2L refrigerants that must comply with item C of ASHRAE 15/2022, section 7.5.1.2? Proposed answer, yes. In accordance with ASHRAE 15/2022, equation 7-7A, there is no correction for the effective dispersal volume for unit systems installed in a public corridor or lobby. See ASHRAE 15/2022 for definitions of refrigeration system, unit system, self-contained system, lobby, and waiting room.
Any questions or comments on question 3? Let's keep going.
Question 4, ASHRAE 15 does not provide a definition for public, only definitions for corridor and lobby. Is the IBC definition for public use areas the applicable definition for ASHRAE 15/2022, section 7.5.1.2? Proposed answer, yes. Public use areas are defined by IBC as interior or exterior rooms or spaces that are made available to the general public. See ASHRAE 15 for the following definitions. Corridor, an enclosed passageway that limits travel to a single path. Lobby, a waiting room or large hallway serving as a waiting room.
Okay, any questions or comments? Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve this opinion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, this opinion is approved. We are through the mechanical code opinions. We have 5 or 6 energy code opinions. I wanted to get the view of the committee on whether you would like to take a 10-minute break right now, since we're about halfway through our scheduled meeting time, or if we want to just power through these remaining opinions.
I'm good with continuing, actually, or yeah, either way.
I'm here. I'm fine with continuing.
Okay, let's keep going.
Okay. So September 11, we're moving into the 2021 Commercial Energy Code. Looking at section 403.3.2, HVAC equipment efficiency testing. There are several manufacturers of monoblock heat pump units, through the wall, air-to-air, unducted heat pumps that are pursuing AHRI certification. These heat pumps have inverter duty compressor for extended range heat pump heating and capacity control for energy savings. Per manufacturer discussions with AHRI and other testing agencies, these units do not directly fall under the scope of AHRI 310-380 for PTHP, AHRI 290 for SPVHP, or any other existing test procedure. Is it correct that if these units do not have an applicable testing procedure in tables C401.3.2 through 16 and no certification program exists, then equipment efficiency ratings are only required to be supported by data furnished by the manufacturer? Proposed answer is yes, this is correct. Manufacturers shall provide supporting documentation that the unit is not covered by an applicable test procedure and provide efficiency rating data. There is no energy code minimum performance standard for units that do not have an applicable test procedure.
Okay, is there any comments or questions on this? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve this opinion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the opinion is approved. September 12.
Okay, this is Energy Code Section 403.4.1.7, 403.4.11.4, Demand Responsive Controls. Section 403.4.1.7 was added to the 2021 code and was not correlated, may be in conflict with Section C 403.4.11.4. The C 403.4.1.7 provision is also in conflict with many other thermostatic control requirements for other systems in section 403.4. The first question, are only large DDC systems required to have thermostatic controls for heating and cooling systems provided with demand responsive controls capability? Proposed answer, the intent was that the controls be provided for all buildings with multi-zone DDC systems.
Hey, Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, and Chris, I had sent you just kind of maybe a rewording of this based on my understanding. And I guess my recommendation was to state like the intent was that thermostatic controls at the zone level controlled from a DDC system shall be provided with demand responsive capabilities. That's kind of the way I was thinking of it. Does that align with the staff understanding of what this section is requiring?
Yes.
Okay. And I guess in plain language, this is requiring that control systems that are part of a DDC control system shall be provided with this capability to have demand response operation in it, and wouldn't be required for systems that have localized control or systems that are intended for process applications like stairwell heaters or other things that it would negatively affect the system operation and the intent of that controls. So
Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, so this response would also then extend these provisions to any DDC system, whereas in the section C403.4.11.4, they would only be required with DDC systems that serve a certain capacity or type of equipment. So yeah, it seems like this interpretation definitely makes the code a little bit more stringent, but doesn't extend it to all small systems, and then that therefore doesn't conflict with a whole bunch of other code provisions. So this clarification is helpful then. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that explanation. Okay, question 2.
If all thermostatic controls for heating and cooling systems, including small standalone systems like electric heaters, are required to have demand responsive controls capability, is the controls demand response device and utility signal required to be provided now, or can that be retrofitted in the future? The proposed answer is the demand response device and utility signal is not required at this time The code only requires that the systems are capable of participating in future demand response programs.
Any comments or questions on this answer? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve this opinion as revised.
So moved.
Second.
Been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The opinion is approved. Next.
Okay, September 13th. Also on the energy code, C404.11 and 404.2.1 regarding pools and spas. Are surface hot water heating systems that serve pools and permanent spas required to comply with heat pump water heating provisions of section C404.2.1, including the primary and supplemental water heating provisions of section C404.2.1.1 and C404.2.1.4. The proposed answer, the first option, which was staff's preferred option, was no. The scope within section C404.11 states that it governs all energy consumption requirements for pools and spas. So the water heating requirements are covered solely by section C404.11.1. The alternate answer is yes, surface water heating for pools and spas must comply with section C404.2.1 and applicable subsections.
Okay, any discussion among the two options? Michelle, was this covered in, did you have a comment in your email? I'm trying,
I did have a comment
This
I'm
particular
just
one.
looking for right now. Yeah, I agreed with option one.
Okay. Is there any discussion on approving the staff recommendation of option one?
And just to be clear on this, governs all the energy consumption requirements, but it also includes a reference to other sections for certain things that are not covered within that section. So it references beyond itself for some situations.
Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree that the code the 2024 code could definitely use some clarification in this regard. So this is a good question to pose and answer. Agree with using option. I don't think there was any specific discussions of the heat pump water heater provisions applying specifically to the pool as far as the pools as part of the adoption process. So this is a conservative interpretation here. It's probably warranted. As Chell mentioned, the section C404.11.1 does refer to the equipment efficiencies in section C404.2. So there is reference to that section, at least for the equipment efficiencies. So I would agree that answering no is definitely the way to go for this code cycle.
Lisa, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Just the context I'd like to lend is just having participated in the code language development for the EPCA requirements, and with regards to service water heating equipment, the bulk of the discussion was focused on, what we would consider, standard service water heating equipment. It did not, we didn't get into, like typical domestic water use. We didn't get into like pool use. And so that is like a different scope. And so I just wanted to share that was not something that I recall that we covered when we were developing some of those updates.
Thank you for that background. Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the opinion with option 1 as shown on the screen.
So moved.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 This opinion is approved, September 14th.
Okay, this was a question that we got in from both the city of Bellevue and King County on can VRF equipment use either ASHRAE 90.1 2019 or 0.1 2022 test procedures to show compliance with minimum heating and cooling efficiency equipment requirements? Proposed answer is yes. Equipment shall use the test procedure they are rated under for showing compliance with minimum equipment efficiency requirements. The minimum efficiency requirements in ASHRAE 90.1 2022 for VRF equipment reflects the most current ANSI standards these types of equipment are required to be tested under. And you might recall that at the last meeting, for both the committee and the council, Ben had brought forward some concerns from manufacturers on the differences between the two testing procedures.
Great. Lisa, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. The table in ASHRAE 90.1, what it shows, and then it's actually in the 2022 version, it actually shows both the requirements prior to January 1st of 2024 and then after January 1st, 2024. It also covers that for, looking at the table, for the smaller units, for so less than 65,000 BTUs. The breakpoint for that was before January 1st, 2023, and then after January 1st. So the ASHRAE table in the 2022 version is more complete. So, I mean, we could look back to the previous version of ASHRAE, but the one in 2022 kind of covers it all.
Thank you. Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with what Lisa just said in that we could just reference solely the 90.1 2022 table, as it contains the minimum efficiencies for both the previous test standard as well as the 2021 version. But yeah, ultimately this answer would provide guidance and the ability to show compliance with the appropriate test standard that the equipment was rated under. So I think it's I think the answer is appropriate as written. We could tune it up a little bit, but overall it'll help with projects that are currently under design or looking to get permitted. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other further questions or comments? Ben, you mentioned maybe further tune-ups without any specific suggestions for language change. Are you comfortable with the opinion as shown?
Yeah, I think I'm fine with how it's written right now. I don't know if others have any suggestions on additional clarifications, but I'm fine with it as is.
Any other comments? I'd like to entertain a motion to approve this opinion.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor of approving this opinion, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The opinion passes. Final
this-
discussion, minimum efficiency.
This is kind of part 2 of the last one, and this one comes from just Keene County. This is for warm air furnaces and unit heaters. To demonstrate mechanical equipment efficiency compliance for warm air furnaces and unit heaters, is it acceptable to reference the minimum efficiency requirements in ASHRAE 90.1 2022, Table 6.8.1-5 and Appendix F, Table F-4 as an alternative to the minimum efficiency requirements in the 2021 WSEC Table 403.3.25? And the proposed answer is yes, the minimum efficiency requirements in ASHRAE 90.1 2022 for warm air furnaces and unit heaters reflects the most current ANSI testing standards and are equivalent in terms of average energy efficiency to the referenced table currently in the 2021 Washington State Energy Code and can be used to demonstrate compliance.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on this opinion? Lisa, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, this particular question addresses what appears to be errors in the table from IECC. And so what ASHRAE recognized that the information, and it's with regards to equipment that is installed inside the US versus outside the US. And so, ASHRAE took care of this with their addendum, and this is just accepting all those corrections that they made that are now captured in the 2022 version. So this would clean up some efficiency requirement issues that are currently in the 2021 Washington State Code.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'd like to entertain a motion to approve this opinion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor of approving opinion 24 September 15, signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The opinion is approved. Krista, I show we are through the set of requests for opinions. Did I miss anything?
There is one more that got lost in the flurry of proposals this month that we will be bringing to the meeting in October, but I don't have anything prepared on that one yet.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Patrick, go ahead.
I have a question. Did you cover the water heater installation for the residential energy code interpretation that's on the agenda?
Yes, it was the first one.
Oh.
And it was, Patrick, it was approved as drafted.
May I make a comment on that even though it's already been approved?
Please.
So I talked with some builders about this, and getting their perspective is that natural gas water heaters are already required to be placed on stands about 16 to 18 inches off the ground for safety requirements. They are usually placed in unconditioned garages, but because of that requirements, they always have air between the base of the heater and the cold concrete. So the code language makes sense for electric space heaters that don't have that requirement to keep them from being in contact with that cold concrete to maintain their efficiency. But that having that insulation does not make sense for natural gas water heaters. So we thought that there was room for the committee to recommend an interpretation that recognizes this and accepts that natural gas water heaters placed on a stand with air in between the stand and the concrete floor as meeting the requirements of this section. I'm sorry, I didn't notice that you covered it at the beginning. I don't know if the council feels like they can go back to that or not, but thank you.
Given this information, is there any member of the committee that wants to reconsider this decision? Seeing none, thank you for your comments, Patrick. We will move on to the next item or the final item of business. Any other business to come before this committee? Seeing none, we'll declare that closed. And we've reached the end of our agenda. Krista, we very, very much appreciate all the work on going through and analyzing and preparing draft opinions, and appreciate the work of the committee this morning. It's great to get through a lot of detailed work.
And my thanks to Ben and Eric for doing a lot of the heavy lifting on the mechanical interpretations.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. This helped make things go very smoothly this morning. We're at the end of our agenda, so we're adjourned. We'll see everybody at the SBCC meeting next week. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks all.
Everybody.
Have a good weekend.